Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. In this next Wheel of Cycling video podcast, I speak to none other than Richie Porte. Now, Richie Porte, as you well know, is a true legend of world cycling and particularly an Australian legend as well. He's won the Tour Down Under on two occasions. He's been third overall in the Tour de France. He's won the Dauphiné. He's won the Tour de Romandie. He's won the Tour of Switzerland. And basically, I could go on and on and on. We look back on his illustrious career. We dissect what makes the perfect teammate and what makes the perfect team environment. And we also look to the future, as well as looking at me, well, diving very, very poorly. Well, as that strange AI voice said, recording is in process. Richie, thanks for joining us, mate. It's lovely to see you. How are you settling in with your new old life kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm finally back in Australia. We got here 2.5 weeks ago. I had 5 days at home. Home for me now is Tasmania, so it's a part of Australia, but just underneath the mainland. But yeah, then I went pretty much straight to Tour Down Under in Adelaide for a couple of weeks. So it's nice now that I'm back in Tasmania, and life's good. I mean, it's nice. I don't feel the stress like I did. I mean, the last years, especially with kids, cycling was quite a stressful job, to be honest. So it's just nice to have a normal life.
And what about the reception you received? And I've read a lot in the press, and I've no doubt lots of people have been asking you this question, but I have to ask it. What was it like to go back to the TDU, especially as just a normal bloke on your bike? Obviously, a man with an amazing history, a legend of the sport in Australia. But what was it like to go back to that race and just spectate and enjoy it?
Yeah, it was nice, and just to, like I said, I could go to my thing at the moment is swimming. I'm really enjoying that. It was nice just to go to the pool and just zone out from the cycling bubble. But then, I think the Australian fans, they're always quite respectful, but it was nice just to meet, the people that stayed up till 3 a.m. watching you in the Tour or the Giro or those races. But I don't know, it was just great that they got the race back on after 3 years, and it was nice for me to enjoy Adelaide as a city and the hills around Adelaide just as a normal everyday hobby cyclist.
And what do you think now, Rich? I know I'll ask you a question about your career in a little bit and how you perceive that, but have you got any idea at all? I'd imagine you have, about what you want to do in the future, or are you just enjoying the here and now, or do you have any plans? Because let's be honest, you're still a pretty young man, only 37. You've done an amazing amount of things in your time, but you've got your young family, the rest of your life ahead of you. That must be quite exciting.
I mean, it sure is. I think obviously now, with cycling, it was hard to, 100% be there for my wife and the two kids. So I guess that now really takes precedent in my day-to-day life. But at the same time, I'd like to put something back into cycling, and I think I owe it to help some of the young kids here in Australia to make that step to Europe. And I've got a couple of things going on with my team, Bridge Lane, which was the stepping stone for me to to have that opportunity to make a career of it. But I think cycling's given me so much that it'd be nice to be able to help the next generation of Australians to do that on the road.
Did you find that a little bit in your last year with Ineos? With Trek, that wonderful podium in the Tour, then back to Sky as it was, the same infrastructure, and as a couple of young Aussies like Plappy. Did you find, as the kind of one of the elder statesmen, that you were able to pass that back on? Did you enjoy that in the team? Did that really happen? Was there an opportunity for you to appreciate doing that at all?
Yeah, look, I mean, I always, there's a really good bunch of young kids in Ineos. Guys like Magnus Sheffield or Plappy, as you mentioned. Even for me, Pavel Sivakov,
Yeah.
he's still a guy I'm in touch with. He's not that old, really, is he? But look, I just think that those guys do listen to the older guys. I think that's with Plappy. It's also about setting up in Europe. It's like I lived in Monaco for so long. You do have contacts that want to help the young guys. So from that point of view, yes, but at the same time, these young guys are just so good, and they sort of want to do it their own way, which is, I mean, we were no different, our generation either. I remember some of the older pros telling you, what you should do, and you didn't really listen. But then, as you get older, it's like, like as Dr. Phil would say, an aha moment is, and then it's like, okay, I get that. I know what they were trying to tell me. So I mean, it is some journey for guys coming from Australia, especially. It's not possible to come back and in mid season and see your family. So it's a massive adjustment.
Well, I'd say looking at that, because it's something we don't really often talk about. A lot of the focus in interviews and the press is about these young riders and how exceptionally talented they are, and the numbers they're putting out and what they're able to do, the really disruptive nature of racing these days, which is spectacular, especially from my point of view as a commentator and a fan. But there are still a lot of young riders that are coming into the sport and maybe a talented, but can't actually adapt to the cultural side of it. So it's an important thing, isn't it, to give youngsters guidance, because they're still growing up. They might be somehow through coaching, we might have unlocked their physiological key, but in terms of the mental side of it, adjusting to being halfway around the world away from your families, it's something that maybe isn't focused on much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive part of it. I guess even for the British guys, it's still a 2-hour flight from home, and as you say, it is a massive cultural shock. It's as much as I felt at home in Monaco, it never really did feel like home.
Yeah.
I knew that it wasn't somewhere I was going to stay, but also, you can't really judge these young guys on it's like all of a sudden, they're winning races because they're so good now, or they're signing big contracts, and it's like nobody really coaches you how to deal with that. And it does change you. I think when you get a bit older and you have kids or whatever, it brings you down to earth, or also you see how it is. When you're winning races, the world's your oyster. But then as soon as you have a string of few bad races or bad results together, you do see that there is quite a fickle side to this sport. And I think Ineos is one of the best teams in the sport at supporting their riders. I always, they always read the situation really well, and I think that's across the board with most of the riders. So for me, Ineos was a really supportive and brilliant team, but not all the teams are that good. So, it is something definitely now that I think other teams are getting better at too, is supporting these riders. And I mean, these riders are an investment for the team, aren't they? So,
Yeah.
It's sad to say, but that's just the way it is. It's not just cycling that's going like that either.
Well, I was actually talking to, and I'm going to bring this up because I was chatting to Matt Holmes yesterday. Obviously, he's just retired from professional cycling, and he bumped into you, and obviously, he was the only guy to nab the on Wollonga a couple of years ago to break that amazing chain of wins. But he had a tough last year at Lotto and has now decided to move away from the sport. But a lot of riders now are signed on long-term contracts, but some riders, it's hard. I mean, pro cycling is brutally hard, and you are actually when you strip away the top tier of riders at the best of the sport, the rest of the sport is made up of really good riders who are fighting to earn a living, and it's brutal because they quite often get spat out the other side, and there's nothing in place for them. So, as you say, even if you don't end up getting a contract, keeping, nurturing a rider, giving them the skills to cope with life is massively important, because so many riders are struggling when pro cycling is no longer a part of their life.
Yeah, look, I think Matt Holmes is a guy that wouldn't mind us talking about
No,
him. I mean, in my opinion, he's a. I mean, not just because he beat Mel Malone, but he's a massive talent, and he does belong in the World Tour in a team that's going to give him opportunities. I mean, you don't win a stage like Wollonga if you don't have a bit of something. So for him to now find himself in this position where he doesn't have a contract, and now he's looking for a 9 to 5. It's unbelievable. I mean, he's a great guy. I don't think you'd find anyone that's got a bad word to say about him. But it's just the nature of the beast, I
yeah,
guess. It's guys are getting signed younger and younger. I mean, I turned professional when I was 24. I don't think that's really going to
that's
happen
quite
now.
old, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, it is. Maybe you look at a guy like Jay Vine, who's just won Tour Down Under, won stages of the Vuelta last year. And he's another rider that would have fallen through the cracks if it hadn't have been for, a different pathway. But it is one of those things. Like for me, I was ready to retire. I had a family. I'd done quite well for myself from a financial point too. But then there's these guys that work just as hard who, they just get unlucky, and then they're supposed to go on with life with I guess it's probably more a thing you worry about with the young guys now is they were so young turning professional, and it was their biggest goal in life is to turn professional, and maybe they don't have anything to back them up if it doesn't work out. I mean, it is something that when you get a bit older and you have kids for yourself, you do start to worry a little bit for the next generation.
no, no, totally. I actually, it was 2010. You just mentioned you turned pro. That was my penultimate year of riding at domestic level. And I remember having a chat to you. You were riding for Saxo, but weren't you? And in the Tour of Britain. And I remember having a bit of a chat with you. You just come out of the Giro not long, well, early that year as best young rider. And I remember a fresh faced Richie Porte. Everybody was talking about. I mean, that must seem like an eternity ago.
Yeah, I mean, it sure does. I mean, I think, I was quite an angry young man back then, probably. Yeah. Since talked to Ed Clancy about that race, and he's forgiven me. But, some of the things that you said or did in the heat of the battle, it's like that can be held against you. But yeah, look, I mean, those were the days that I mean, I loved that, just it was like you were young, you had something to prove, and that's just the way you raced. But that was great. My first year as a professional was seems like so long ago now, but just so many incredible memories, and when I think back to that, it's just some of the best days of my life, really.
Yeah, it is a very it's a the thing about cycling that I often forgive me if it sounds like I'm repeating myself, is that it is such a brutally hard sport, but if you work hard and apply yourself and make sacrifices, when you get any measure of success, whether it's personal or whether it's individual, and for you, you've had an enormous amount of personal success, but also you've been the part of so many winning teams in the past as well. It's so multifaceted and multi-textured, isn't it? What's rewarding, but again, it's a sport of enormous highs and enormous lows. But one thing you do get from cycling, regardless of your results, I think, is you do grow, don't you? You learn very, very quickly. You find out a lot about yourself, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, every day out on the road, there was, you'd find yourself doing something. Like for me, it was like Col de Braus or Col de Madone, often by yourself, and there was always, I think it's one of the great things about exercising, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
your mind does, often wander to places where you can think about, have a good think about other things other than just cycling. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is an intense sport at sometimes. But I loved riding my bike. That was probably the one thing that I never really lost that enjoyment for getting out into nature and earning a living off riding bike is it's quite an incredible thing to be able to do.
And just looking back to that podium in the Tour, and it was a couple of years ago now, that couple of years you had with Trek. I think I was on the Tour actually then with you, reporting for Eurosport, and then look at last year with Geraint finishing on the podium as well. You were in amazing physical shape, but what extra motivated you think enabled you to go so deep when at a point when the sport was changing enormously in relation to these young riders coming through and doing things that were almost unheard of in terms of numbers and their abilities in TTs and climbing? What do you think enabled you? Apart from going really well, mate, was there something that year that made a little bit of a difference, or was it just sheer dogged determination to seize that opportunity? What do you think what it was?
I think for me, definitely the biggest thing was that my wife was pregnant at the time, and you know, my second child was due, and I had that conversation with my wife during the COVID lockdown,
Yeah,
when the tour dates were announced. You know, normally I'd have been pretty much done for the season in September, and I'd be there, but then, you know, my wife and I had a chat, and she said, "No, no, you should go." You know, it was pretty much my last time I would go to the tour as, you know, on a team like Trek. I knew I was already going back to Ineos, but I knew that when I was going back to Ineos, it was to help, you know, the Bernals and the Thomases and these
sure.
guys. So I think that was it. Really, was you know, you're missing the birth of your second child. You want to go there and perform. You know, I think um, anyone that's got kids would know that. You know, it's, you know, it was like I was really good at making things more stressful than they needed to be as a cyclist, and winding myself up. But then when you have, you know, your wife, you know, giving you the choice to go to the tour, and the team were Trek Segafredo were, that was a very human team. They also gave me the choice if I didn't want to be there. So yeah, I think that for me was the biggest motivation to go there and perform.
And looking back, what do you think was the most one of the most enjoyable races you ever did, despite the success? What's the race that you think? I don't know. Looking back through your Palmares briefly before we came on, and there's obviously we all use pro cycling stats. There's a lot of yellow jerseys. You won a lot of bike races, mate. Stage races especially. But is there one particular race that you look back on, Richie, with fondness, with like, yeah, that was just amazing. We had so much fun because as a collective in
Yeah,
teams, quite often it is about the fun. It's about the camaraderie, isn't it?
yeah. Look, I mean, for me, it'd have to be the 2013 tour. We had a brilliant team. Obviously, we won with Chris Froome, but I look at that team now, and I mean, most of us guys have stayed in contact. You know, I think there was G, Froome, Stanner, Pete. It was just Edvald. Like, it was just such a good click, and I think that's just how it is. You know, is if you see a team like we were, and at dinner, you know, we were the team that was laughing the loudest. That's for sure. And I think it always, you know, the fact that Froome was the best bike rider
Yeah.
in the world at that, you know, at that point, made it easy to sacrifice yourself for him. You know, you knew that, barring a disaster, that he was going to finish the job off. But we had such a brilliant time, and the fact that, you know, we're all pretty much, you know, get on well now, nowadays too, says it all really. I think, you know, it's hard to replicate a bond like that.
And of course, around that time, Chris was living in Monaco, Geraint was living in Monaco as well. So even out of the races, were you someone that wanted to ride? Did you ride a lot with each other? Or was it a bit of both? What was the? Because everybody has their own
Yeah.
kind of training plans these days, don't they? And are very focused. But did
Um,
you manage to get out much together?
yeah, I mean, we did. We were all trained by Tim Kerrison, who was another brilliant, you know, guy in the team's guy setup. But yeah, I remember it was pretty much the last ride we did before going to the tour. We went over into Italy, and you know, the next thing, a car came too fast out of a side street, and to be honest, we were probably going a bit too fast too. And I remember, um, I think we all just piled into the side of it, but only G came off. But yeah, and that was one of those things, like how it could have, I mean, it could have ended right there. That was
Yeah, yeah.
probably, yeah, a bit of a, but um, yeah, I mean, we trained a lot together. We did, you know, a few long stints up in Tenerife too, which, you know, we're probably one of the first teams to really go there as a whole Tour de France team, and you know, get ready, up in Tenerife.
Right. And actually, Richard, talking about Tenerife and time on altitude camps, rooming. Obviously, pre-COVID, you obviously had a roomie. What were you like, Richie? Honestly, as a roommate, were you somebody? I mean, you're a lovely guy. Let's be honest, but really be self-critical here. What were you like as a roommate?
Um,
Without asking you
yeah,
who the worst or the best was, what were you like?
I, I was I was always tidy. I was always if the roommate went to bed, I'd always, go to bed too or go to
Okay.
sleep as well. Probably the biggest thing for me was that I used to snore. Well, yeah, I was a snorer, so that was probably a bit of an issue. I always found that with, when you're a snorer, half the time the guys that would go to the breakfast table and say, "Oh, Richie was snoring like a bear," they were also snorers. Someone like Chris Froome never really complained about it. He was never stressed about anything like that. He's so laid back. But yeah, I think other than the snoring, I was always, maybe wasn't a very good shot at the toilet bowl in the middle of the night. But yeah, at least I'd always clean it up if I knew. I've had some roommates that don't know how to clean up after themselves. But yeah, I mean that was one of those things that when with cycling there's not many sports where you do have to room, but I really enjoyed the company of quite a lot of the guys over the years. And I mean, it's just nice from the point of view that you can chat to your roommate about the race scenarios or some of the stories that cyclists have and what they've experienced are pretty incredible too. Just always enjoyed that side. The stories from guys like Mick Rogers and Bradley Wiggins about things that they'd experienced. I loved that.
Yeah, I think it's the excuse me, the same for me when I was growing up as slightly older riders in the team, or even they don't have to be older, but sharing those anecdotes and having a bit generally laughing a lot of the time. You do develop a quite a strange sense of humor because, especially if you're training hard, a lot of the time you're basically in a state of pain on the bike, aren't you? Even on a long endurance ride, you're never really comfortable, are you? So having fun is such an important part of bike riding. It really, really is. And it is nice, although I guess there's a few people saying about the scientific nature of the sport now. There are riders, the young riders coming through do seem to be, although they're incredibly strong, they do seem to be doing it their own way and expressing themselves and having fun. And that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, um, that's true, isn't it? You look at Remco, and I mean, everybody knows he's going to attack, and half the time they know when he's going to attack, but nobody can do it. Or you see, you know, Tadej Pogacar, he's out training, see him training with his girlfriend, who's obviously a pretty nifty bike rider
Yeah.
too. But it's like, yeah, it's quite scientific. But when you see that, you see Tadej out with Erskine, I mean, it's obviously in a happy place. And I always think that at the end of the day, happy bike riders are fast bike riders too. I think something goes hand in hand.
Do you think you'd ever? I know you're saying you're helping out the team that provided you with a stepping stone in the sport. Can you ever see yourself in the future as a director sportif, directly managing a team, or do you think you'd be more hands off, being involved in the team? What do you think you could run a team or influence a team in a way that you'd like, perhaps?
I don't think so.
No.
I'm probably not. It's not really my kind of thing. I don't think, but I'd like to be involved with some of the young guys. I get along quite well with the young guys, and I mean that's something that I'd like to do and stay involved with. But in terms of director sportif, I've seen how hard those guys have to work.
Yeah.
It doesn't just stop when they get out of the car. They've got performance meetings, and they get the pressure from like Rod Ellingworth as well. It's a non-stop job. It's almost like they're married to the job as well. So that's not something I'd see myself doing, especially when we've just moved back to Australia. I can't see myself, coming back
Yeah.
to Europe to do.
Yeah. Fair enough. But what do you? Just going back to teams and your experience of riding within different teams for the best part of 20 years, if you include your Conti teams before you went into the World Tour. What do you think is the most important ingredient in a team, Richie, in terms of keeping a team together?
I'd have to say, like we touched on before, that the successful Tour de France teams where everybody's mates, and get along really well. I think I think back to the Dave Brailsford managed teams like Team Sky, where it's like Sky, nothing was missing there. There was great bikes, great equipment, things like that. I mean, when everything off the bike with brilliant staff, I think that was one of the best things about Sky and Ineos is they probably had the best staff, from soigneurs or mechanics, things like that. It's you never had to really think for yourself because you knew that you were going to get on the bike, and 99% of the time you're on the best equipment, or you had the best mechanics in the business working on your bike. It was just things like that, I suppose, is the less thinking you had to do about things was always going to be easier to get out there and perform.
Yeah. And what about now, riding? We've obviously seen some pictures of you out on your bike. Is it, I take it, it's still going to remain an important part of your life, isn't it? Just the freedom that it gives you, and the fact that your body is hardwired now. You're a cyclist. You're more than a cyclist. You're a father. You're a husband. But essentially, cycling, I take it, will still be a massively important part of your life in terms of just making you feel good.
Yeah, look, I mean, I spent a couple of months in Manchester for the winter, and I didn't do anything really. I didn't fancy getting out in the cold,
Don't
and
blame you.
when I'm not, yeah, I mean, I'm not professional now. I don't have to do it, so I didn't. But then after a couple of months, I really really missed it. I mean, I found myself on Zwift, which after the lockdown when we did so much time on Zwift, I found it a bit of a chore, but then I just enjoyed that, having 1 hour on Zwift a day. It really helped me. I think from a mental point of view is when you've done it professionally and your body's used to that endorphin rush when you get off the train or off the bike. That's something that I'd like to keep going. And I also find it's nice now that I'm back here and you can train with so many different guys from different walks of life. I really enjoy that too, and especially when you're not looking for numbers and stuff like that in training. It's nice just to do have a chat to guys that have lived a normal life, and you learn so much on every ride from the bunch.
Well, just on that point, just to wrap things up, I was going to talk about my remember the diving we did in Denia when I was with GCN. I was looking back through some of my old photos the other day. I think it came up as a memory, and there's a picture of me and you in our swimming gear, swimming trunks, goggles, hat, because obviously swimming was a big part of your life. But do you remember that day very well, Richie?
Oh, I do. I mean, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Some of the things you do for sponsors, it's yeah. It's just, I think it's nice when you look back at that and when you can actually look at yourself and laugh about some of the stuff you've had or done. But it's just things like that. Yeah, that's a great day. Yeah,
It was. But basically, we made a video when I was with GCN with Richie with his swimming background about using swimming primarily as rehabilitation. And I remember at the time there'd been a bit of miscommunication. People thought we got the message that Richie he swims to train for cycling, and it kind of wasn't really the case. It was more, I do it for fun, and also it keeps me fit, and it's good for rehabilitation. But anyway, we were on the pool for about 2 hours, weren't we, trying to get this video shot, and we ultimately had to dive in. And can you describe, just before we wrap things up, what my dive was like, Richie? Just
I think the word unco comes to mind. I don't know if you were foxing or not, Matt.
Mate, I wasn't.
I
I've never dived in off the side of a pool like that because I've never done any. Because I just was just almost like panicked.
I think that's one of the things, isn't it? It's like it's just to be out of your comfort zone. You can ride a bike and everything, but then when you have to do something different, it does make you, a little bit worried. Like if I had to play basketball or whatever, swimming for me is a bit different because I've done it since I was a kid. But when you see like Charles Leclerc playing basketball and stuff, it's like, for an F1 driver, it's like it is weird to be
Yeah.
doing something that you're just, absolutely terrible at. I'm not saying you were terrible at it,
I was. I
Matt.
think. I mean, that was a bit of a Freudian slip there, Richard. I was terrible. Let's be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah,
So,
great memories of things like that. No, I think that's just it is nice to have guys like you around that don't take yourself too seriously. I think it's it's
yeah,
probably something you learn now, isn't it? When you have kids and you go to a race like Tour Down Under, and people are looking at you and saying, "Oh, that's the guy that won on Willunga," every now and then you've got like a 2 and a 4 year old just out of control. It's like anybody that has parents knows that everybody else who's there for the for the free wine and champagne or beers, who let them in, kind of thing. So yeah, I like that about cycling though, isn't it? It's always that sport that'll bring you straight back down to earth.
certainly does, mate. It certainly does. Well, just one final question, and it's back referring to you liking to go out for rides with people from all walks of life, all levels of fitness. People just want to that want to ride. To maybe youngsters watching this who are thinking about a career professionally, or at least trying. Just what one piece of advice would you give them? You think that could help them? That maybe that's helped you.
I just think that before you're professional is not to take it too seriously. It's like it's another can of worms. This whole body image and things of cyclists. It's like I think at some point you just have to embrace it's like I didn't look like a pure climber. I have a bit more muscle on me and I'm short, big chest, things like that, and just things like that. It was you were always having to deal with comments on your shape, or you looked heavy or things like that. But I think that kind of takes the enjoyment away of it. I think enjoy it before it becomes your job. I think that's probably one of the and you should be doing it for yourself and nobody else. I think I was lucky with that. Like my parents, they couldn't have cared less if I was a professional bike rider or whatever. I mean, for sure they enjoyed my career, but it's a too hard a sport to be worrying about what everybody thinks or says about you, or or stressing out too much until it does become your job. Okay, when it becomes your job, it's a it's a you're married to your job, I suppose, aren't you? And I think that's probably just the one thing I'd say to young guys is to young people is enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it before it does become a job.
No, it's. I know you touched on the body image there, and we won't delve into that too much. But I know your wife did. So there was some. Let's just briefly talk about it. But
Yeah, let's do it.
yeah, because it's important. I noticed the tweet
Yeah.
from your wife about somebody you'd posted a picture, and I saw it on Instagram. And to me, you just look like Richie Porte, and it's like out on his bike.
Yeah.
But because obviously you weren't as lean as you were when you were racing, you were just
Yeah. Yeah.
people felt the need to be quite abusive, and I found it quite shocking. But it is a terrible state of affairs that people are abused like that, and it's very shallow and actually quite it can be quite damaging, can't it?
100%. I think, for me, who I did my amateur days in Italy, where, my directors were, always telling me that, yeah, you're a good bike rider, but too fat, things like that. And it's like, I think for me now, it's like, I am a little bit less sensitive to it than what my wife was. But at the end of the day, I'd retired after being professional and watching all that diet, and it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like I would never go up to somebody and just comment on. I just don't think that's my place to do that, and
Yeah.
it is pretty shocking when you see what some people say. I know some people say it as a joke, but it's not really the way to joke. But it's amazing the amount of people when I was in Adelaide who, to your face, are like, "You look brilliant. You look healthy." I mean, I saw one of the Team Ineos doctors. He's a brilliant and caring man, and he saw me and he said, "Do you know what, Richie? You look healthy. You're the most healthy I've seen you in your life." And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like I understand cycling is a power to weight
Yeah,
sport, so you do need to be lean. But I think in the off season or when someone's retired, that's your time to relax and let it go. And people don't need to be hearing stuff like that. It's and at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not fat. It's like I can still squeeze into shorts or jeans that I used to wear as a professional. So it's I just think it's when you have kids as well, you do need to be careful what you say to people, and and weights should be totally off limits, I think.
yeah, it totally. I, there's the one kind of rule of thumb is would somebody might say it on Twitter or on Instagram because they're hiding behind the keyboard, but I tell you what, nobody come up to your face and say it, and that's like, well, why would you say something to somebody that you wouldn't say
Yeah,
to their face? And it's very very lazy, mate. And I'm glad
yeah,
it was dealt with real vigor and passion, and the amount of support that came out. Because
yeah,
let's be honest, these are a few idiots. Let's be fair.
yeah,
The vast majority of
exactly.
people are nice, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I've met some absolutely brilliant people in the the time after retiring, and it is the vast majority that's they're very supportive. It's that they understand it's no longer my job to be ready to race, but you know there's some really good people out there, and you do appreciate when good people do step in to have you back.
Oh, definitely, mate. And I know there's a lot of people who have big fans of yours who've appreciated what you've done over the years, and really, I think your life is beginning again, really, mate. I think, and all I want to do is wish you all the very best for the future. Hopefully, our paths will cross at some point. I would like to come out to Tasmania and go out for a ride because we've been talking about a ride for a long time. Let's try and make it happen, mate. But and
Make it
until
happen.
yeah, definitely, it would be a laugh. We just won't do any swimming if that's okay. We'll just go out for a nice little cafe ride.
Sounds good to me.
Good stuff. Well, Richie, thanks very much indeed, mate. You take care, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks very much, Matt, and cheers for having me on.
No worries.